good news, and that is that we've been here in Tel Aviv all day long, and there have been no bomb sirens, no rockets launched towards Tel Aviv since the very early morning hours when the deal was just being announced. That has not been the case in Lebanon. And when the deal was announced, Pakistan's prime minister, who was critical in the brokering of this deal, came out and said that Lebanon was included. And there are over 1 million people in Lebanon that have been displaced over the last 5 weeks. Some of those people potentially confused by that message, maybe thinking it was time they could go back to their homes. And then you had Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, first thing this morning, coming out and saying Lebanon is not part of this deal. And then you had Israeli Defense Forces warning people in Lebanon to not go to the south, and that there were going to be attacks coming from Israeli Defense Forces. And then they launched the most intense campaign they have since this war began. And you have more than 200 people killed, more than 1,000 people injured. The Israeli Defense Forces also saying that because of where Hezbollah headquarters itself, according to them, in highly residential areas, those were the kinds of places they had to hit. And you saw those images today of apartment buildings, not just in southern Lebanon, but also in Beirut, in the capital, very close to the city center, these apartment buildings completely leveled with rescue crews in this kind of life or death struggle to try to get to people injured under the rubble. So now you have this disagreement. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard says that Lebanon was supposed to be part of the deal. They are threatening to respond militarily. You also have the threats about the Strait of Hormuz. This is the kind of thing that, with a fragile ceasefire, could be the thing that breaks it all apart. Gotti?
Yeah, and speaking of this Strait of Hormuz, is it open right now or is it not? What's the latest there?
There are a whole lot of ships going through, and that is not entirely surprising. You know, it has been very easy for Iran to shut the Strait of Hormuz. One drone in an oil tanker, and suddenly it is stopped. Insurance companies aren't going to insure the tankers as they go through if they perceive that there is too much danger. Clearly, with how unsteady things have been, there is that danger. Even though Iran agreed to open it up and allow for safe passage, that doesn't necessarily mean they fired up their engines and they're getting ready to resume normal back and forth transport between the strait. It could take a while for that to start to happen. Also, keep in mind, Gotti, that even if that does start to happen, there has been so much damage done to the energy infrastructure in the Gulf that it's going to take a lot more than just opening up that strait to get things back to normal.
Yeah. Meanwhile, in Iran, we saw demonstrations burning American flags, Israeli flags. What is the mood tonight in Iran and elsewhere in the Middle East?
Right. You did see some government loyalists come out, hundreds, potentially thousands of them, celebrating the ceasefire deal, calling it a victory. Also, keep in mind, too, that the people who don't agree with the government don't feel safe coming out and demonstrating in any way. They feel that they could potentially lose their lives as a result of that. But you did see these loyalists burning Israeli flags, burning American flags, the Iranian TV touting this as a victory for the country, Gotti.
Yeah. And as we see those images, there are so many images that we are not seeing happening in Iran tonight. Stephanie Gosk, thank you so much. Now let's bring in retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davison, Senior Managing Director with Trends U.S., Bilal Saab, for a little bit more on this. So, Lieutenant Colonel, in a ceasefire, militarily, strategically, what happens inside of a country like Iran? Is this going to allow for digging in? And is the United States going to continue to fly uncontested over Iran with jets and drones?
Well, ideally, that there would be no more incursion of the airspace. I think that's one of the things that Iran specifically said. In fact, they cited Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, specifically complained in an ex post this afternoon that there had been a drone coming, he alleges, from Israel, and it violated Iranian airspace, which he said was not part of the deal. So they're not supposed to be any flying over the territory there. And then that means also that the Iranian side is not supposed to be firing anything south into Israel or anywhere else in any of the GCC countries. So far, it looks like that it's partially holding, mostly holding. Certainly not to the degree that it was before this ceasefire or whatever you want to call it took effect. But definitely all the sides will be taking advantage of the opportunity to not be hit with anything else and try to repair damage or so. And, look to see what their leaders do about whether it's going to continue.
And Bilal, how do you think that this is being seen right now by Iran's allies and by those who support the government right now in Iran?
Well, let's start with the Iranians themselves. I mean, the government. I wouldn't be shocked if they're seeing this ceasefire as, frankly, a major win. I mean, obviously, they're seeing it first with extreme caution because they've been burned before, and they don't trust the president to honor it. Last time they were starting to negotiate, and all of a sudden they were attacked. So extreme caution, but at the same time, they feel quite emboldened that they got to this point. And I feel like, it's... I describe this contest sort of as a game of chicken, and rightly or wrongly, I feel like the Iranians believe that we blinked first. And so if you look at their allies, I mean, let's just start with the top, a proxy that they have, which is in Lebanon, Hezbollah, right? They probably have mixed feelings. I mean, on the one hand, they feel that they're happy that their masters in Tehran are not getting shot at by the Americans. That's one. But on the other hand, now they have to deal with a much more aggressive Israel, which clearly has no interest in honoring this ceasefire. They're going all out, basically, against the organization in Lebanon. And that's the difficulty, and I agree with the colonel. That's the difficulty of a ceasefire like this. I mean, if it were bilateral, all you have to do is just basically monitor any violations from either side. And here you got multiple sides, right, with different kinds of priorities and interests. And so you're going to have to see, a good bit of, honest to God conversations between us and the Israelis to make sure that we're sufficiently in alignment here.
Yeah, that brings up such a good point. And Lieutenant Colonel, I want to ask you, I mean, we saw Israel today say that they were going to honor the ceasefire with Iran, and yet big asterisk when it comes to Lebanon. And that seems to be a big, I don't know if it's a deal breaker, but definitely a source of contention for Iran. Do you see this in the Benjamin Netanyahu's interest, this ceasefire, or do you think that we could see attempts by his administration to try to continue to escalate here?
I don't think there's any question that they did not want this ceasefire at all. Many of the people that are kind of in Trump's inner circle, and even in the United States, that are also very close friends to Israel, like Jack Keane, flat out said he did not like this and did not agree with it. Didn't think that it was a good idea. Benjamin Netanyahu went on television today in Hebrew and said that, listen, everybody needs to understand this. The war is not over. We are going to continue on until we obtain all of our objectives by whatever means. So he's certainly talking in language. It means that they're going to continue to fight. And if he's required to stop, to do anything with Iran specifically,